Okay, we are live. Hi, welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. It's been way too long. We did a show back in 2022. I did it with him. His name is Rick, Jennifer Carlson, and Roberta Glass of the True Crime Report. We went over kind of recent developments at that time in 2022 about what has to be called the saga, the West Memphis 3 saga. And it came to my attention that he's been working on a series, which he completed the fifth part, I think, and you'll see his YouTube channel. He completed the fifth part like a week ago or something like that. But it's really the best up-to-date version of the West Memphis 3 that you can find. So please go. I'll put a link to his YouTube channel. It is Burn After Reading, and some of the stuff looked very familiar to me, and some of the stuff was new. I tried to get through it, but it's about, I don't know, 8 hours of work. So some of the stuff like I knew because I published my book in 2012, and I've tried to keep up with things and keep going. But I'm glad that there's somebody else researching and doing it. And I know Rick is very familiar with the West Memphis 3 case files because I see them intersperse the pictures and the documents, actual documents like factual events from the court case and from the case files of the West Memphis 3. And he's titled it The West Memphis 3 for Dummies. And it may sound kind of like derogatory or something like that, but I was a West Memphis 3 dummy too. When they got out in August of 2011, I just thought in my mind, I was like, oh, there must have been some kind of mishap in the original trial, and they got out. And I didn't think much of it. So I just thought something went wrong and that we're guilty because I had seen the 3 documentaries, noted documentaries from HBO. And I saw the first one and just thought, okay, they're guilty, and just went on with my life. But it took me a while to kind of look through the cases, and luckily somebody had posted all of the documents on Callahan 8K, which I think are still there in some iteration. I don't know if Callahan 8K is still available. I have copies of all the court files somewhere. But anyway, there's a lot to talk about, a lot of things. We were talking in the pre-show to go over some of the confusing. There's a lot of confusing things in this case. So if you're confused and there's some things you're vague about, this is like the perfect time to ask somebody, an expert. If you're on Rumble or X, ask a question, feel free, or go to Rumble. I did put a link to the live show on my X if you're listening to this, so feel free to ask a question to Rick or me. I had some of the recent stuff I'm not as comfortable, I'm not as smart about, frankly. I haven't really, gone on to kind of other projects. So Rick is an excellent person who's done all the research, so you could ask him. But we were talking the pre-show. There's a lot of confusing things. Did buyers do it? Why did the parents change their minds? Why did buyers start supporting the victims? What was the involvement of John Douglas? Is there animal predation? What's the DNA evidence? Why are they still in the news? I have actually a recent report from like 2 weeks ago that says this new DNA stuff is going to exonerate them. So there's a lot of stuff there. And a lot of the answers you can find, like, you may not even know the questions, but reading through and watching Rick's videos could answer these things that you don't even know about. So there's a lot of facts out there that haven't hit the public that Rick knows about. So I'm delighted to have him. Rick Mullen-X, welcome to the show.
William, thank you for having me.
Excellent. So for people who may not have known your name, I know you don't just focus on the West Memphis 3. Maybe you can talk about your research, how you got interested in it, some of your work and led up to this 5-part series, West Memphis 3 for Dummies.
Sure. And to do that, I figured let's kind of go back to the beginning. A lot of people will ask me where I got the name Burn After Reading, and they thought maybe I got it from the Gabby Petito case, but I actually had it before that was going on. So the name Burn After Reading, it was inspired by a 2008 black comedy film written and produced and directed by the Coen brothers. For those who haven't seen it, it's like how do I describe it? A beautifully chaotic train wreck that you can't look away from. And you have to imagine like a group of self-absorbed, slightly dim-witted, and hilariously inept characters stumbling into a spy thriller. But instead of James Bond, you just get a bunch of bumbling idiots. And it's like the Coen brothers took all the ridiculous, I guess, of everyday life, threw it into a blender, and hit puree. And I find it disturbingly relatable to the current state of the true crime community, where many individuals claim expertise but lack genuine understanding. And I wanted to leverage this premise to call out all the charlatans and debunk prevalent misinformation and promoting a more nuanced and accurate discourse. So over the years, I do go into many things. I go into the Maura Murray case. I go into Skylar Neese. I go into the Delphi murders, but never as extensively as the West Memphis 3 case. And, I've developed a comprehensive collection of content focused on the West Memphis 3, presenting evidence that supports their guilt and validating the verdicts of two separate jury trials. My work also addresses and debunks misleading narratives, spewed by various films, books, and podcasts that advocate for their innocence. Furthermore, I've uncovered additional evidence beyond the trials that reinforce their culpability. And when creating this type of content, I strive to innovate and present information in a unique and engaging way while reiterating factual information. That's always essential for raising awareness. I aim to contribute something new to the conversation. So, this approach led me to develop Perception Isn't Always Reality. That was a series that I did, which examines the guilt of Damien, Jason, and Jesse individually, as well as the media frenzy surrounding their case. Later, I condensed this series into a single in-depth episode called West Memphis 3 Guilty, which has become my most watched episode on Burn After Reading. And I also created a series critiquing the Oxygen Network's The Forgotten West Memphis 3. And that was another documentary advocating the trio's innocence. And Bob Ruff was a big part of that. And the project stands out probably as my most sarcastic and snarky work, largely due to the series' overconfident and self-absurd tone, which I found particularly grating. The premise of the series was inherently flawed, with the investigator, Bob being a former inspector, attempting to reopen an unofficial murder investigation into a case that had already been solved. And this notion, that's akin to suggesting that a postal inspector or a food health inspector is qualified to investigate homicide cases. And to me, that concept, that was, that's absurd on its face. And given the apparent lack of credibility, I didn't bother delving into to Bob's more extensive podcast, Truth and Justice, on the subject, because I had and I still have more productive things to do with my time. I also I was invited by a West Memphis 3 supporter with a YouTube channel to engage in a debate about the case, and I accepted. However, this encounter was marred by controversy. We recorded and published part of the debate on both our channels, but afterward, she withdrew from further discussion due to the intense criticism she received. The backlash was severe enough that she eventually deleted her channel and has since been inactive. Don't know if she's ever going to come back. And for the record, I bear no ill will towards this lady. I entered the debate in good faith, but the experience taught me that engaging in discussions with diehard West Memphis 3 supporters can sometimes be unproductive and often contentious.
I can agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. And so as a result, I've decided if I'm ever going to get involved in another West Memphis 3 debate, I would like it to be something that's more like a panel, like having the best of the best on the guilt side versus those who are fairly known and well known on the innocent side. And if we're going to do it, let's do it that way. And, my channel features other West Memphis 3 resources, including episodes, updates, audio recordings of Jesse Misskelley's multiple confessions, and opening and closing arguments presented by both the prosecution and the defense during both trials. Now, by late 2004, so I want to say about November, I felt compelled to create a more comprehensive West Memphis 3 series. And despite my previous efforts, I believe that there were essential aspects of the case that still needed to be addressed. And I sought to develop a linear and exhaustive narrative that would guide viewers through the entire case from start to finish. Additionally, I recognize the importance of catering to different learning styles. So while my earlier work had primarily been audio based, I understood that visual learners observed information in their own way, through visual aids and observation. So by incorporating both, the auditory and the visual elements, I aim to create a more inclusive and engaging learning experience. And this approach ultimately led to the development of the West Memphis 3 for Dummies. And it's been well received, and it's even changed some minds, which, I mean, that's incredible because it takes a lot of time and effort to dismantle the propaganda machine. It's not easy. And these people who commented, on my page about it went from believing the West Memphis 3 were innocent to leaving believing that they're guilty. And then, of course, some, at the very least, at least it created doubt in the narrative of innocence, where they may not be fully convinced that they're guilty. The whole innocence thing that they heard wasn't as strong as it was before. And please let me know if there's anything else.
No, you okay there? I mean, you just dropped off a little bit.
Oh, no, sorry.
That's all right. I'm just trying to chat with somebody. So there's a lot going on. There's a 5-part series. You've kind of finished it, I think, 12 days ago, looking at your site there, Burn After Reading. I mean, when you went through this, you're trying to change people's mind. You talk about this propaganda machine. Maybe that's like the most important aspect of the case, is how they were able to really solidify in the public mind that these guys were not guilty. I mean, they're guilty at law still, and we know this. But like what, like we have to find the real killers. They had and it got perpetrated all through the media. And I think that was, I mean, it's really one of the fascinating aspects of this case, even though it's like grotesque, but like how their talking points were permeated national media, whether it's on TV, print, journalists, podcasts, whatever. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as, in my opinion, where the innocence machine started to, at least the spark started, was, with Paradise Lost, the first one. They presented something very differently to the family when they talked about that film. It was supposed to be a cautionary tale about these violent teens, and instead it turned out to maybe not as strong as future films, but was kind of giving you doubt about their guilt. And so because of that, a lot of people watched Paradise Lost. It inspired them. I mean, that's what happened with Damien's wife, who got heavily involved and I believe helped with the propaganda machine, helped get a lot of powerful people involved in that, people like Peter Jackson, to name one. And of course, maybe you might have an example, but I don't recall ever a murder case involving children that was ever so strong in the media, as far as someone being railroaded, like in the West Memphis 3 case. I don't recall another time where all of these celebrities, came to the defense of murder victims like this before.
No, I don't. I do have a chapter in Abomination about cause celeb killers, and I included Abbott. I remember that one guy, Abbott, who was in jail, then got out, and then killed again. I think it was Abbott, and then the other black guy who killed a cop. Like, why are the celebrities supporting some of these killers? But no, I think this was unique. I think it really took the cake in the amount of celebrities we can go through the list: Johnny Depp, Dixie Chicks, Margaret Cho, Henry Rollins, the guy Eddie Vedder, who was there once they got released. Like, there's creepy pictures of Vedder with Damien Echols upon his release from jail in August 2011. He seems to have bought the propaganda. I don't know where he is today, but like, it was really, and the amount of money from their own side that they admitted to is they raised $10 or $20 million. People don't know this. This is a huge amount of money. And I think it was partially like it allowed them to get this guy, Lonnie Sulry, from New York, who's a skilled, I would say, in my opinion, propagandist. They call him public relations guy, but I think in this case it was propaganda. So I mean, and also they got so many people on board that validated. Like, who would believe that John Douglas could be turned by these guys, right? The famous like mind hunter or whatever, his FBI agent, vaunted FBI agent, who you mentioned in your documentary too. Like, why wouldn't somebody just like, it's the classic trope of like, you trust the expert, right? The expert says they're innocent, therefore let's go ahead, right?
Well, they're experts for hire, and to kind of go back, mentioning Paradise Lost, I believe, unfortunately, what those filmmakers did, I don't think that they never could have imagined how this would turn out today, I would assume. But they wanted to create an interesting film over a truthful film. So they wanted to create something compelling. They wanted to give something for some, people to talk about, and it worked better than I think they ever could have imagined. And it went from something that was chaos, unorganized, to now something more orchestrated, a cause, and that's what it later turned into. um
Right. I mean, it's incredible. And it really, I mean, Douglas himself, so it's there's all these paid experts who show up, whether in court or out of court, for the West Memphis Three, like big names, like Spitz, right? Or Spitz was his name.
mhm. Spitz, yeah.
Spitz,
Warren Spitz.
yeah. Like, he was the one who like promoted the animal predation theory, right?
He was the first one I remember talking about it, especially, the fact that he thought maybe a large dog or cat somehow, and I want to be very sensitive when I say this, dislodged the bodies from the water, thrashed them about against trees, and then somehow the three children somehow magically made it back into the water. That's ridiculous on its face. And then, of course, later the aquatic thing came about of maybe some kind of, turtle, snapping turtle, alligator turtle, or maybe something else. And and Douglas, I'm glad you mentioned Douglas again, because as I was discussing the Paradise Lost, it's like, we don't think people don't want to believe that these people aren't willing to do things for money. If someone
Right.
is willing to give you, a decent amount of money, people got to pay the bills. People got to pay their mortgages. People, and it's not like these people are poor, but it's like, but more money you have, the more comfortable you are, or so it would seem. And so John Douglas, he put together a profile. This was a custom profile intentionally put on Terry Hobbs. There's no ifs, ands, or
Right.
buts about it. And he's done this in the past before. And I actually go into that in Delphi After Dummies. And so, you know, and then to go back and say, well, Damien, Jason, or Jesse had no violence in their past, or they didn't
Right.
have any disruptive family life. It's like anyone that even does half their research would be like, how this is supposed to be one of the most famous FBI profilers, and this is what you come up with. So he custom profiled it for the defense, for
Right.
Terry Hobbs, to help create doubt, and that's really what it was. It's just create doubt and put it in the court of public opinion. Try to make it so annoying that the state of Arkansas never wants to deal with this case again.
Right. And it worked. I mean, his involvement helped to get their release. There's a picture of Douglas and Eccles together. I'll see if I can find it. It's really disturbing, but like, you can see the FBI profiler believes West Memphis Three are innocent. This is before their release. I don't know if people know this, but I wrote an article about it. And you're right. He just got everything wrong. Like, it's astonishing. It's like one of these heads. You're right, but they will do and say what they have to say for the coin, the expert for hire. And it's a real disgrace. And he was also, for people who don't know, he kind of has bungled other cases. I think he bungled the Green River case too, right?
Yeah, and guy Paul Morin, he pointed at him as a murder suspect for Yesup, and then it turned out to be another individual based on DNA. And then he basically wanted to treat that DNA like it was a red herring. It was sexual bodily fluids inside of a woman. This was not empty DNA. This was not something you could explain easily to why something was in a child. Um, So so that one he doesn't want to admit to. And then there's others where he admits to the blunder and he corrects it, and I give him credit for that. The only thing I agree with him on his profiling on the West Memphis 3 was that he actually places the murder there, where other, before that they want to try to take the murder outside of the woods, put it somewhere else, and then um, they want to state that it was a dump site. So I'll at least I'll give him that. It was that he puts the murder there and that it feasibly couldn't have happened anywhere else. And Occam's razor, it happened where the boys were last found and where the boys were discovered. So I'll give him that.
Right. I mean, and one of the things that is confusing about this case is how does Pam Hobbs and how does Mark Byers change their opinion? And I write in this book, I mean, it's in my book and it's in this article, is that Douglas traveled to the city of West Memphis in 2007 to, quote, interview, unquote, family members. Douglas met with Pamela Hobbs, mother victim Stephen Branch, and imparted to her his theory of the case. And this is him writing. This is not me writing. This is Douglas. Quote, by the time I left, Pam no longer believed the West Memphis 3 were guilty of the murder of her own son. That's dark. That's Douglas. That's Douglas.
And it's a misuse of trust because, John Mark, he tells a lot of stories and, his sincerity on some things I question, but that's opinion based, not fact based. But anyways, you have John Mark Byers, you have Pamela Hobbs, and an extent other parts, family, Todd Dana Moore, Terry Hobbs, Melissa was gone at this point. They all listen to this guy, believing, there's some kind of, credibility. And that's probably what Pam and John Mark Byers saw was credibility. And I think John Mark Byers was so sick and tired of getting pounded on, which was by his own doing, by acting like a clown in the films and
literal paid clown, like they're paying him money. People don't know that.
And it's not that other family members have never been paid for their participation. It's usually what they believe the participation was for in the first one. At this point, John Mark Byers knew what his role was. So, so a lot of that browbeating was kind of self-induced. Not that anyone should ever threaten or harass. I mean, going to their home, like no one should ever do that. I don't care, even if they are their own worst enemy on that, but it does invite it. And if something can be invited, and maybe, I don't know, maybe John Mark Byers was naive to think that it couldn't, but I think after a while he was basically done being the scapegoat and was glad to put that on someone else. But then again, how serious was John Mark when he was literally threatening to kill Terry on the anniversary of the murders? I mean, so does he truly believe this? He really may have believed what Douglas said. And I just think Pam, it's like she's listening to someone who thinks is an expert on the case. I think she was angry with law enforcement from the get-go, even though for a while she believed that they were guilty, but there was still a lot of resentment there. So I don't know.
I think that the other thing, one of the backdrop of this case, and maybe one of the reasons why there's so much confusion and different takes, is like this happened in kind of a lower middle class environment. And the parents were not super sophisticated. I don't think any of them had a college degree. They're all really working class parents. So they may not have had, so somebody sophisticated who could come to them, I think it's maybe overwhelming influence or something, like it's undue influence or almost coercion. But by his own admission, Douglas's reputation and his involvement in the case persuaded two of the parents to change their belief of guilt to innocence. And this is a common thing. Like when people go, oh, they're innocent because two of the parents changed their mind. The Branch father never changed his mind.
Nope.
And neither did the Moores. So
no, they didn't.
But one of the sickest pictures that you'll ever see in the world is a picture of Pamela and John Mark Byers with Eccles, the killer of their kids. Byers was the stepfather, but it is so dark. But let me see if I can find that picture of Douglas. Anyway, that's just one of the things that's really sickening. I mean, that's the thing that makes you head scratch over this case, is how could this actually happen? And this is how it happened. Douglas is admitting it. John Douglas, vaunted FBI profiler, is admitting it right here. This isn't my work. You can go read his book. It's called... It's not very, I don't even know if he wrote his stuff, Law and Disorder.
Well, and even like, what's crazy of this phenomenon and how it grew. It's like, okay, so you had the Paradise Lost film, and then you had the people who would eventually create the WM3.org, a bunch of people throughout the United States, but also mainly through like California. They see this, they see a film, and they see,
Right.
based on a film without full context, that they believe the West Memphis Three are innocent, and they like to say, well, we don't believe they got a fair trial. So they try to, they state innocent, but they're mostly saying didn't receive a fair trial, which I believe that they did. So like, so that happens, and so other people. Then you get the celebrities that see it. Then you see you get a groupie. Damien gets a groupie that wants to marry him, and here we are. It's nuts.
It's nuts. It's really nuts. And like, I don't know how many times in all of the fights that I've had online, like forever on Facebook, I have so many screenshots and stuff of people coming after me and saying horrible stuff, but they would come at me. I'm an expert in the case. I've seen all 3 documentaries. That's like one of my favorites. Like, I got that all the time. It's like, you're getting a Hollywoodized version of these events. They never get it. This is a
Mhm.
picture for people who are watching this on Rumble, Exa Rockfin. You'll see Eccles. They're smiling along. There's Douglas with Eccles on the table's tarot cards and something else. And Eccles has that black dragon tattoo on his forearm, like right there, showing it right to Douglas. Douglas probably has no clue what's going on.
And Douglas, I mean, he's a Hollywood guy, right? Like, didn't he consult in Silence of the Lambs,
I
if
don't
I'm not
know.
mistaken?
I don't know.
So, he gets involved in these Hollywood, either movies or TV series. And I think it's a guy who, I mean, thank you for serving in the FBI and hopefully solve some good cases. But, I think this is a guy who's evolved into something where it's just, give me money, I'll tell you what you want to hear. And, you do these consulting to these films or TV series, you feel self-important. And I just think it's a guy with, you know, he's, like I said, he's just for hire. It's like, give me money, I'll do what you want me to do.
I'll say and do, and like literally going out to convince the parents. Like, it's super dark. Like, there's a lot of stuff happened underneath the surface. We can talk about Devil's Knot too, if you know about that, and
Yeah.
her involvement. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but Eccles and his wife gave up their rental storage unit. They didn't give it up, they stopped paying it. And some guy in Arkansas bought it and found all of his books and all this stuff. But there was a proof copy of Devil's Knot in that rental unit that he bought, which means that there was some connection between Mara Leverett and these two prior to the publication of Devil's Knot, the so-called book of record, right? Do you
Right.
know that? Are you aware of that? Like, this is incredible. So, like,
Yes.
yeah,
Like, I believe it was either on your episode or I believe
yeah,
it was on Ed Opperman's.
yeah. I talked to Ed. We
Yeah.
talked to the guy who bought when I was working with Ed. We did a lot of good shows on the West Memphis 3. We talked to the guy, and I talked to the guy who bought that storage unit. Like, if you watch those shows where like people bid for storage units, he was literally one of those guys, and actually sent some of like, well, yeah. I mean, he told me there's some really dark stuff in there that he sent back to Eccles and his wife. But also Eccles wrote a lot of stuff in there where he says, I am the devil. A lot of porn, stuff like that. So
Doesn't
a lot of
surprise
stuff
me.
in there. Yeah. But yeah, one of the other people, the guy who was Jack Underweger, was another celebrity, celebrity killer. I don't know if you remember him. He came to the US and killed people. He's from Vienna. But the other guy was Jack Abbott. I don't know if Jack Abbott wrote a book called, he was supported by, he was In the Belly of the Beast was his bestseller. He was supported by Norman Mailer and Christopher Walken and Susan Sarandon. And then he got out and killed other people.
Hmm. Yeah, not familiar with those.
The other guy, I forgot the black guy's name who killed the cop, but like,
Hi, William. Are you still there?
yeah, sorry, I'm sneezing.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. I'm
No,
sorry.
I was making sure it didn't go out.
Yeah, no, I mean, these days with StreamYard, you never know.
Mhm.
But anyway, I can't remember the other guy's name. But anyway, there's so many aspects to this case. Like I said at the intro, super confusing. But once you see these other people's involvement and meddling with the public record. It's really not believable that Douglas and Leverett would like take the sides of these guys. Is really not believable. And Leverett leaves so much out of Devil's Knot. It's like, and even the movie, there was a movie, for people who don't know, based on Devil's Knot. It's an industry. It's a saga. There's 3 documentaries. There's West of Memphis, which was produced by Eccles, I think.
Yeah.
Like, these are incredible events. And we're at the very end of West of Memphis. He says, I made it my life's goal to be the greatest magician that ever lived. So like, he hasn't stopped with his like occult practices, has he?
No, and I think he even made a statement too that magic got me into this and magic got me out.
Yeah.
Referring to prison.
Yeah, no, you're right. Magic, magic, magic. I think you repeated. He didn't say law and the facts. So his magic, magic, magic got him out. He's a good liar. You cannot. I mean, I've done videos where you take him apart where he has his points down. He knows how to like turn journalists, and so many journalists have been turned by this guy. Yeah.
Well, and if you just listen to him talk, like if you're having a one-on-one and you don't really know much about the case other than just maybe the general things that you may have heard on the news, or if you did watch a documentary or two, or you watched them all, and then if you heard him talk, he's very compelling. But then when you realize the facts of the case, like for example, like he told Larry King, oh, I live 10, 15 miles away from West Memphis. I know in Marion's not 10, 15 miles away from West Memphis. I say Marion because he occasionally stayed with Dominique, but of course he lived in West Memphis, I believe
he literally lived in the apartments across from the Robin Hood Hills
when he was younger. Yes,
when he was younger, so he was very familiar with that area. He always leaves that out. Like literally, the apartment looks out to Robin Hood Hills.
Well, and this is what's crazy. He leaves it out, but then writes about an almost home that he remembers looking beyond there at night and the creepy feeling that he has. So he's such a pathological liar or a habitual liar that he can't keep his story straight. So it works in a vacuum. So like if you're talking to someone that doesn't know you or doesn't know much about you or your case, you can have that conversation. You can be very compelling. If you're just a viewer watching television, you don't know really anything about this case and you're just hearing him, or watching him give an interview. I agree. He's very compelling. It's just once you start to learn, like just all that stuff evaporates.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody go from I know they're guilty back to innocent. Like maybe there's one, but everybody goes from, oh, I was told they're innocent to like, oh, these guys are guilty as hell. And Eccles is constantly lying. Like I can actually say that, like I could be actionable, like, but I know he's lying. I can prove it in a court of law. Like this is easy. He's left out so much stuff. Like it's incredible. Constantly baloneying these people. It's crazy.
Right. And people have a different criteria of what proving guilt is. In some people's mind, they think it has to be DNA based, and that's not true. That's like about 10%. I don't know if that's increased since, but about 10% of murder trials is decided on DNA. And then you have others, much like the Delphi murders and then the West Memphis 3 case, where you have a lot of circumstantial evidence that's involved, the totality of evidence. Not one thing in its own right convicts them, but once you put the puzzle together, you start to get the picture. And people confuse beyond all doubt, beyond reasonable doubt. Yes. And so there is a standard in trial. So I think people, they really put their own perceptions based on what they don't know and of the case, and then also what they don't know of the law.
Yeah, there's a lot of ignorance of the law in this case. They don't understand. Some of the people don't understand what it means to be guilty. Like I will go through arguments. I mean, you talk about talking to crazy people or people who don't know about the case. I say they are guilty at law. And then they'll say to you, I don't think they're guilty. And I'll say they signed on the line that is dotted in 2011 that they are guilty of first-degree murder. And then they'll say back to you, I don't think they're guilty. Right? And I'm saying, like, you're not defining like actual words and their meaning. Like literally you can have this circular runaround with these people and they literally aren't trying to like mind rape you. They just don't comprehend what these words actually mean in a dictionary, It's like,
and I also like to ask them, I'm like, give me a case where someone was found innocent that gets probation. like if you're innocent, there's no probation. You're free. You are exonerated. You're or there's no evidence. I was like, but in a case like this, in the Alford plea, not only did they get free based off saying, like, okay, I maintain my innocence, but I also admit the prosecution has enough sufficient evidence to convict me if this were to go to trial. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. But then on top of it, they were tacked on 10 years of probation. If they would have, I guess I would say, grossly violated the violation, because they have violated it, but it was just never enforced. Like, for example, with Jesse, he had some DUIs. I believe he even had a domestic issue.
Oh, wow.
So that, that right there could have put him right back. And he would have had to have served 21 years if he would have violated that within the 10 years of probation. Damian and Jason, they, as far as I understand, didn't really have any, what I would call, at least in the beginning, any stable employment. Well, that was part of the probation violation. If you don't have steady employment, you're out. But then I think Ellington said, "Look, well, in this economy, it'd be hard for anyone to get a job. So no, we're not gonna do that." Ellington just wanted it to be done with and just prayed that there wouldn't be anything gross that would bring them back, so that it would cause him a headache. And then, of course, here came Bob with MVAC to make his life a living hell. And I have no respect for Scott Ellington the same way that I did for Brent Davis. And for maybe any viewer who doesn't know who Brent Davis is, he was one of the prosecuting attorneys that helped convict the West Memphis Three, Jason and Damian in one trial and Jesse in another. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that man. And Fogelman, John Fogelman, who was also Jason there. Baldwin to the grind.
Let's see if I can find Davis. I think he's in one of your videos. That's not working. Anyway, there we go.
It happens.
He's somewhere here. That's Fogelman right there.
That's John Fogelman on the right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's Davis.
Yes, that's Davis.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's he did a good job. I think Fogelman's closing argument was good too, right? Like, he's literally talking about, like, let's see, am I talking to myself?
I believe they did a fantastic job. Both of them did. Davis, he stayed on for a very long time, longer than Fogelman. So I just think, what, I really would have wondered if Brent Davis didn't become a judge, and if he was still the prosecuting attorney at that time when all this stuff was going on, and if he would have been presented the Alford plea as something that would be possibly agreeable. I'm curious to what Davis would have done. I don't think Davis would have taken it. I think he would have said, and I think Lisa O'Brien has said this too in her podcast, where, well, let's see what happens at the evidentiary hearing, and then we'll talk about it. I just don't think he would have taken it. I don't personally, but that's opinion based. I don't know.
Have you followed up on Jason Baldwin and his book? Like, he raised like $30,000 to write a book. Did he ever finish that? Do you know?
No, he has not produced a book. As far as that money, where it went, I assume it went to him. As far as how, I don't know. But he never produced a book. I think what he did was, you're seriously going to ask people to have you sit at home, do nothing but just write your book, while you have these hard working Americans give you this money, or maybe people that don't have enough money but for some reason believe in your cause. You take that money and you can at the very least produce a book out of it.
Right, he never produced it. It was a memoir. Jason, there it is, $29,000. Let's see if he's. I haven't checked on this in a while.
Yeah,
can you see this online? Let's see. Let me see if I can add this to stage. Oh, I gotta remove this.
Yeah, he straight up conned people out of their mind. I thought he at least would have wrote the book. I really did. I was like,
here it is, 720 from 2013. So we're at 12 years. Risking 12 years, no book. I don't think he's done it yet. Updates. So here's the updates. It's still writing it. Comments. Let's see the comments. Comments are fun. 3 months ago, I wrote to Jason on X 12 days ago an inquiry about the memoir. No response. You can ignore us. Just ignore him. Any news on this? Somebody says. Coming up on 10 years, somebody wrote. Bummer. This is the only Kickstarter that I've supported that vaporized. He's still working on it 3 years ago.
And William, there's no excuse. He can self-publish that book. That's what Dan Stidham did with his A Harvest of Innocence, which is a harvest of something else, in my opinion. But at least he was able. He self-published it because I guess at that point no publisher wanted to do a West Memphis 3 book because it was kind of exhaustive at that point. But Jason, he could self-publish it on Amazon or other self-publishers for free, and he can write his book if that's what he wants to do. I feel he does. I mean, it's convoluted because the book would be garbage. It would be a bunch of self-serving nonsense. But he owes people a book.
He certainly does. $30,000 is a lot of money. Have you read Stidham's new book? I know he just published it.
Yeah, Dan Stidham, A Harvest of Innocence. And I read it. It was very difficult because it was a lot of patting on the back, and the way he wrote it, it's hard to explain. It was just very obnoxious. And don't get me wrong. I mean, even when, I believe they're guilty, I still try to read a book for what it is. I enjoyed Maura Leverett's book. I enjoyed it at the time. I've read it again. Not agreeing with her book, but at least it was fairly well written. Dan Stidham's book, it was kind of like what you would see in a movie where it's that one guy in a small town and he's the last outlaw, so to speak. He's the last one who's looking for truth. That's what his book really came across as.
Right, and he's featured in all of Jesse's confessions, plural, right? His Stidham, right. And he ignores that in his public talks and books. I assume it's in the book too. I know in his public talks he never mentions the confessions.
Right, and he also makes a lot of other claims too about someone. I think he was the one that said this, but I could be wrong. About a jury member going with Judge Burnett to lunch. Things like that, a lot of things. It's like you waited all these years to finally say that. Right. Like, why didn't you say it back then? Yeah. Right.
And you said you have Jesse's confessions on Burn After Reading too somewhere, right?
The ones that were actually audibly available. Right. There are some that it's only in the written form.
Right. So there's 3. I call one the Against the Advice of Attorney. So he does it against the advice of Stidham, and then the One Hand on a Bible in the presence of Fogelman and Price, I believe, and Stidham. Like, nobody ever mentioned. This is the omissions. These omissions are the greatest form of lie. Like, it's incredible that they're left out. That's what people don't understand.
Well, and people, will say like, oh, well, Jesse just wanted to confess afterwards because he wanted to, reduce his sentence. And they act like the reduction would have been so significant that where it's like, of course you're going to turn. But all they did was remove the life sentence, but it's still 40 years. That's still an awful long time. It's not like they said, hey, we'll give you full immunity or we'll only give you 10 years or 5 years if this is what you would do. Under those circumstances, I can maybe look at that and go, okay, regardless of guilty or innocent, who wouldn't take that if you have a life sentence? But there were so many things in the one thing in Jesse's confession you cannot run away from is the fact that he said that he ran and he grabbed Michael Moore. And that is a detail that he has always been consistent with, was that he ran to chase to go get Michael Moore. He was found 25 feet away from the other children, Christopher and Stevie. That lines up. And he also gave details about that crime scene that only someone that was there would know.
Right. I mean, there's other elements, like stuff that it's very dark. Like, I saw them wiggling like worms in the water. How does somebody with a 72 IQ come up with that, or 80 IQ,
Right.
Like, and really dark stuff.
And like, look, do I believe there are things that he tried to fill in the gaps and lie? Yes. I think everyone can understand that he did lie about details. He admitted that he was doing it trip law enforcement up. But another reason he gave, which was very true based on everything he stated, was that he was drunk on whiskey. Now, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, who has been intoxicated, and if you're drinking whiskey, you're not going to remember every single detail. I think you're going to remember some what I call flashes of things, you know. For example, when you see children getting beat, or if you're participating in that, you're going to know. But are you going to know every nuance to it? No, but he knew enough that was compelling. And I mean, it compelled the jury that found him guilty. That was information he gave up. It wasn't anything fed by law enforcement. They didn't say, hey, Michael was found further away. Why don't we tell him, that he went and he chased him? Like, it's ridiculous and it's absurd. He also, put the knife in Jason's hand. He correctly identified who was cut, either on the face or, the bottom half. I had someone like criticize, they didn't say it was his genitals. They said his bottom. I'm like, again, but you're talking about a kid who is not the smartest kid in the world. I will agree with that. Jesse is not a very smart individual. He's street smart. But but he's not like completely incompetent. And also, why is it, if the police were so easy to make him falsely confess, why did it take so long for Dan Stidham to convince him to, go with the whole low IQ, I was coerced by the police? Nobody wants to talk about that. Oh, Dan Stidham says, oh, well, because he thought we were cops. No, he didn't. Jesse did not think that Dan Stidham or Greg Crow were cops. That's absurd.
Yeah, it's a total joke. I mean, it's bad. And also that, like, the original confession is always taken apart in the media too. Like, Jesse was taken away by the cops and railroaded for 12 hours and half of it's missing and it was against his will. He was coerced and all this stuff. And that's not consistent with the facts. He was picked up with his dad's permission to go to the police. And they didn't really know that how much of involvement he was. This was, people say like, oh, the Eccles had tunnel vision. They were after him. They suspected him right away. His parole officer said Damien Eccles is possible, the thing, but they didn't have enough evidence. They weren't arrested. It was May 5th to June 3rd, almost a month. So it's kind of a joke. They didn't have the evidence until Jesse went in and implicated Eccles and Baldwin.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, with Steve Jones, they always act like that was with him and Jerry Driver. There was this paranoia, but look, Damien did not do himself any favors. Even if he embellished things that he told Jerry Driver, he said them. He told that to him. And so when you literally sit there and say, we're going from animal sacrifice to human sacrifice, well, why wouldn't anyone pop up and go, ooh, he talked about this? Maybe we should look into him. I mean, I would think it too if it was that closely identified. But it wasn't like Steve Jones just pulled it out of the air. That was from Damien's dumb mouth.
Right. Just, I mean, some of the darker aspects that are in the court files are just off the charts.
Oh, and also, and also what you said about Jesse. You're right. They did not bring him in there thinking that he was a suspect. They just thought that maybe he could provide something valuable because they were interviewing a lot of people. They didn't sit there and try to point the blame to everyone that came in. Some of those people failed at alibi. Some of them didn't. They didn't just take whoever failed the alibi and said, bam, he did it. If they really wanted to get someone, they could have got those kids that were interrogated in California.
Right. And you include those in your documentary, right?
Yes. If they want to sit there and say if anyone could have been railroaded or could have had someone coerce a confession, it's what happened in Oceanside, California with those two individuals. Because one of them got so upset to the point by saying that, like, all right, fine, you want me to say I did it? I did it. But immediately when the officer, the detective said, is that the truth? What does he say immediately? No. But he's so sick of it. He's been there for 17 hours being just, interrogated, told that he's the one that did it. You get sick of that after a while. That did not happen to Jesse. What happened to those kids in Oceanside, California, did not happen to Jesse in West Memphis, Arkansas. There's a whole timeline of everything that happened. That didn't happen.
Right. And there were what are the other red herrings that they give out to the public? They give out the guy at Bojangles, the mother, I can't remember their name, the mother and son who went out, and then she supposedly retracted her statement. A lot of supposed retractions, but some of the retractions aren't really, I wouldn't say they're clinical retractions. They just said, well, I didn't really mean to say that or something. I was on drugs.
Well, and there's like with some of the retractions that are out there. I mean, some of them, probably rightfully so. Others, I think Ron Lax worked them to the point that he scared people. And I think if they take a look at what was happening in '93 with Ron Lax, and then they see what he did with David Jacoby and Terry Hobbs, and I'm sure others, his tactics were, in my opinion, they were disgusting, especially with David Jacoby, giving him a vanilla envelope and saying, and whether any crime scene pictures were in there or not, but basically saying, why don't you go ahead and take a look at your handiwork?
Right.
I think that's David Jacoby, just because a hair that was linked to mtDNA on a tree stump at the crime scene that just couldn't exclude him. It didn't match him. It just couldn't exclude him. And the numbers were astronomical. Same with Terry Hobbs, which was found in the bindings of one of the ligatures. And with him, that's even more explainable with secondary transfer. And we also don't know which shoelace belonged to that kid. They took those shoelaces, off first, and then they started tying the kids. We just don't know which one of those belonged to who.
Right. I mean, that's like the one thing. And the other, I mean, you show in this documentary, one of the lawyers, it was a Buena, or I forgot his name, but like he literally is stating to the journalist, we found one of their hairs. Not true. This is not it's not known to be thing. It's played out in the public, in the propaganda machine, that it is the hair of Terry Hobbs. That is a falsehood. It is not a direct hair. It's supposedly consistent with his hair. And so that is like the evidence of guilt of Hobbs, which is a total joke. And it's total CSI effect phenomena where everybody has to find guilt because of DNA, and this is it. And it's part of this kind of zeitgeist we're in, where people watch a lot of TV crime shows and stuff.
Right. And William, let's hypothetically say for a moment that those were the hairs of Terry Hobbs and David Jacoby. Okay, you're not convincing me. One, they were in those woods searching, so David Jacoby's hair on the tree stump would make sense. As far as Terry Hobbs, again, even though it was found in the binding of a ligature and like one of the knots, I believe, allegedly, okay, all those kids played at each other's homes. Right. There's nothing that would not indicate that his, a fragment of a hair would say anything. It doesn't. And so and even Thomas Fedor, the West Memphis Three's own expert on this type of thing, said it's incredibly weak evidence. This is not something you could take to trial and say oh, Terry Hobbs is the guy. Now, what the defense tried to say was like, well, what we're trying to say is that at least that hair fragment was found that couldn't exclude Terry Hobbs, but there was nothing there that could include Damien, Jason, and Jesse. And even that's not true, because in certain mixtures of DNA, there's a combination of numbers that could not technically rule out Damien, Jason, or Jesse. I mean, is it conclusive? No, but it's not anything that they can rule them out. So they're being very choosy with their wordings. With the hair, yes, they can absolutely say that those two hairs you cannot connect to the West Memphis Three. That is absolutely true. But there's other DNA that you can't exclude them out of either.
Right. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, you have to take the next step in the analysis is why are they focusing on this hair and putting it out in the public? Because that's what the public believes. And once you kind of work your way through this analytical steps, you go, they're obviously doing this to propagandize people, to make them think. Like that should be your conclusion. What if you want to say beg the question or elicit the questions? Ask why this so-called hair is proffered to the public, because they're trying to win in the court of public opinion. I have a full chapter about the court of public opinion in my book,
and
because that's it.
And what can the court of public opinion do? Well, it can make them enraged by injustice of the court system in Arkansas and law enforcement. And so what do you end up doing? You end up donating money. because you want to, what you perceive to be innocent men who are being railroaded, you want to send out money. So it isn't just money from celebrities that are coming in. You have people all throughout the United States who all of a sudden see an injustice and they want to take party to what they think is to right or wrong by getting them out. And so they can lie to the court, to the public. Now they can't do it while they're in trial. They can't do it at a hearing. If they do, they're going to get caught easily. But see, they can do that to the public. They could sit there and say, "This is Terry's hair." They could do that in the public. They can't do that in court.
Right.
So, but the whole thing is transference of money. Transference of money. Influence, outrage. People donate, and you could do something with that money.
I think that's one of the darker aspects of this case. Well, mind control is definitely an element. They're clearly mind raping people, and I don't use that word lightly, but also the kind of way that they undermine the court system. They're almost Roberta Glass kind of turned me onto this case and looked at a different aspect of this whole innocence fraud movement, Serial and all this other Innocence Project losers and all these other people. But this is like another assault on the criminal procedural process. I mean, it really is. And those people like, oh, it's so corrupt and evil. Not really. They did a good job. There's two separate juries all 12 came to the conclusion they did it, looking at the available evidence. You talk about circumstantial evidence. People don't understand these rules. There is direct evidence that people said they heard them. They admitted it, that they did it. There are these young girls that the jury saw who heard Eccles say, I did it. I'm going to kill two more. And the jury saw that. They leave this out of all the stuff. And this is direct evidence. The people don't understand that.
It's not, yeah. And then this should say something. Lying in itself may not say that you're guilty, but it's a data point. Once you start adding it to the totality of things, he said those girls were lying. However, many years later, he said that he probably did say it, but it was as a joke. Right. And then I believe at Jason's Rule 37 hearing, Heather Cleet, Jason's girlfriend at the time, as all this was going on in 1993, she said that Damien said it. That's Jason's girlfriend. So this is not, he went into court, he called them liars. Well, he committed perjury. Of course, that doesn't mean anything nowadays, does it? No, it doesn't. But he lied. He lied, in a court of law, said that it never happened. They are liars. But we now know today, without any questions, that yes, he did say it. Now, he could sit there and say that he did it as a joke, and people could believe that it was serious. And the jury weighed that. And I think he was going through a manic phase at that time that he felt invincible. So, yeah, he'll sit there and tell people. He'll tell people that he did it. Is he going to tell the cops? No, not going to tell them, but he's going to tell other people that he did it. And he's told so many other people too. It wasn't just the girls. People heard him at the skating rink talking about it.
Right. There's a video of him at the skating rink with Miss Kelly. So we know they're in the same place at the same time. That videotape was taken between May 5th, 1993 and June 3rd. It was kind of like a hidden camera video. Like there's all kinds of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, they all have admitted it, right? Didn't it somebody there's an affidavit of somebody who heard Baldwin say it in jail and said he's a very dark figure, I think. This is after, and obviously Jesse just couldn't stop confessing.
Yeah.
There's weird responses too. Like even in Paradise Lost, like weird responses of Eccles in front of his lawyers. And these are videos taken of him like, oh, no more beer, right? So like this actually kind of corroborates what they were supposedly doing on the day of the murders, which was drinking beer, right?
Right, because Damien and Jason, they brought beer. And one of the bags I think is interesting too. I forget the name of it, but Gary Meese actually talks about it in one of his books, where the bag was oddly enough from a convenience store, which I believe was next to Damien's dad's job in Memphis. So from that convenience store, how it ended up there, and then it ended up at the crime scene. It wasn't anything that was brought up as anything very relevant in trial, but I still think that was interesting.
Right.
That it would just come from a place that was right next door to Damien's dad's place of employment. and that it would end up there. My opinion is that beer was probably concealed in that bag.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, so it's just like there's just so much information they've overlooked, and there's so many things. But like I've included some of these statements to the police, so much dark stuff, like the leaving of the pig's head on somebody's porch. People are terrified of them at night. I mean, they're just running around, and just like there's so much confirmation now after these trials. They can never go back to trial again because there's so much additional information, like the post trial confessions of Miss Kelly if they go back in. But there's this, I mean, it's still going on. I literally was doing some research today, and there was a video of like there's a possible new DNA testing in the West Memphis 3 could get them released. Like what's going on with this whole like M wave testing or whatever and the exoneration. So it's still this whole farce is it's gone on for 32 years. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so they're hedging all their bets on the MVAC system, and it's a DNA collection method. It extracts DNA, like it kind of vacuums, like it sprays water and it vacuums everything, and it brings it in, and it's supposed to be better than your typical swabbing method for DNA testing, and perhaps so, but it doesn't come without its faults. But to kind of go over like everything that happened. So like, okay, Bob Ruff in his podcast and his film brings up the MVAC thing. He asks the West Memphis 3 if they'd be, if they would be interested in retesting with this method. Damien and Jason said yes. He had to chase down Jesse to the point that Jesse, I think, just told him whatever just to get it to leave him alone. As you know, Jesse does not desire the limelight of this.
Right.
So he takes it to Scott Ellington. It's like, yeah, so we want to test this evidence with this new technology, as if Scott Ellington was just going to be like, oh, let me just hand over all the evidence to you. Let me know how that goes, because clearly you don't have a stake in this. Clearly there was legal procedures, and a long story short, it ended up going to court in June 2022, and a Crittenden County Circuit Judge, I think Tanya Alexander, I believe was her name, she denied the request, citing that since Damien was no longer incarcerated, he wouldn't seek such relief under the state law. And then in a surprising turn of events, less than 2 years later, the Arkansas Supreme Court reversed the lower court's ruling in April 2024 with a 4-3 decision, remanding the case back to the circuit court. And even today, I find that decision perplexing, as it highlights the interpretation of laws can be influenced by judicial decisions rather than a comprehensive understanding of the legal context. And it's not that it's not unheard of. It happens all the time. To me, it's just frustrating how you can have these judges and they're interpreting the law differently. How is the law not the law? How is it not easy to interpret? And in the majority opinion, Justice Karen Baker, she wrote, it's undisputed that Eccles has been convicted of a crime, and as a result, he is entitled to seek relief pursuant to Act 1780. And in the minority opinion, Barbara Webb said, the majority's decision obliterates any sense of finality in our criminal justice system because their interpretation of Act 1780 means anyone convicted of a crime, regardless of whether they're in state custody or not, could seek DNA or other scientific testing, even if it would not prove their innocence. And before I go on, I should probably summarize what Act 1780 is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so it's codified under the habeas corpus chapter of the Arkansas Code, permits individuals convicted of a crime to seek DNA or other scientific testing to demonstrate their innocence using new technologies that were not available during the original trial. So in this instance, there is MVAC, which is, I mentioned before, the wet vacuum DNA collection system. And to properly explain it, the collection solution is sprayed onto the surface while at the same time being vacuumed off the surface. And it's supposed to be a better way of DNA evidence being collected. Now, going back to Webb's opinion, so she argued Eccles was not entitled to habeas corpus relief because he's not in state custody, and DNA testing would not prove his innocence because his first conviction didn't rely on DNA evidence. And we talked about this before, that, you know, a very small percentage is decided by DNA evidence. And so Webb wrote that the jury was presented with evidence that Eccles knew facts that weren't public knowledge, and multiple witnesses testified that Eccles confessed to the murders. And we just talked about a great example is the softball girls hearing the confessions. And Webb also said, in reaching its decision, the majority ignores common sense, and I do agree with that, and basic legal principles to embark on a fruitless endeavor to exonerate a depraved murderer. Their decision only serves to reopen old wounds for the victims' families and the West Memphis 3 community. And additionally, Webb argued that Eccles is not entitled to habeas corpus relief because his guilty plea constituted his trial, and his conviction is not subject to collateral attack. And in the final quarter of 2024, Damien, announced on X that DNA testing would commence shortly with results expected in December. However, this timeline proved to be inaccurate. And so in January 2025, this threw me for a loop because I thought that this would still have to go back to the circuit court where they would have granted it, but I still thought there had to be a legal procedure. Apparently not, because in January 2025, the Byers family, which I believe is predominantly the brother of John Mark Byers, released a statement expressing gratitude towards prosecuting attorney Sonia Haygood for her decision to conduct DNA testing on evidence related to the murders of Christopher, Michael, and Stevie. But Damien later stated on X that DNA testing was scheduled to begin on February 25th of this year, but he said the testing had been postponed or canceled with no new date set. And I've emailed Sonia Haygood several times just to basically find if certain context of what's going on is true or not. She has not responded, but I just want to make sure it's like, okay, are you guys really the ones who are stalling this or what? Because, well, for number one, I would say even if they are, I think there's more important things they need to do. They need to solve actual unsolved crimes versus crimes that have been solved many years ago, over 30 years ago. But we're only getting context from one side. You know what I mean? And so I wish there was more transparency with the state prosecutor, but she's probably busy. She probably has more to do than to talk to someone who runs a YouTube channel.
Yeah, but it's just crazy that it's still ongoing. Like February 2025, this drama is still ongoing. This is like the video that I took off. This is like from a week or two ago, finding the real killer. That's the same kind of phony motif. But this is John Mark Byers. This is the stepfather saying in the public, this is super, to somebody who doesn't understand the mechanics of this case, this probably confuses the daylights out of them. Listen to this.
Memphis 3 were innocent.
They're innocent. They did not kill my son.
See, we just went over this. This is the guy who Douglas went to, and he changed his story just like Hobbs.
And this is wrong, what the state of Arkansas is doing to cover their ass.
I want true justice, and now we'll never know. I mean, I thought there was going to be a...
So even the journalists don't understand what's going on behind the scenes with Douglas. So they're probably just going, why are these guys changing their stuff?
Trial and them Cracker Jack.
And I think this video shows the empath process. We'll get to it.
Police officers and attorneys.
There's Hobbs. Oh, this is the guy who says they found Hobbs's hair. Watch.
Hobbs, the other stepfather, we can't account for where he was every hour and every minute.
He can be accounted for. According to my research, he was with that guy right there, Byers, for a lot of that evening. So this whole notion that he was like disappeared, and he was never seen muddy, by the way. Eccles was seen muddy, and you had to have been muddy if you were at that crime scene. It was like a swamp. It's basically a dirty creek. Listen to this guy talk and we'll analyze it.
Patrick Benka, part of Damien Eccles' legal team, says that despite the evidence pointing to Hobbs coming to light in 2007, authorities made little to no effort investigating him.
An interview that they did of Mr. Hobbs subsequent to that finding that his hair was at the scene. The interview was...
See, did you hear that? So we just went over that, whoever the listeners are. See how he says he found Hobbs's hair? That's not accurate. That's not the honest truth. And he's saying that. So then people think he's being like, have integrity to the facts. It's consistent. There's a very important distinction between it is his hair to it's similar to his hair, or he can't be discluded from it being his hair. It's very different distinction.
Right. And it's still, again, in context. I'll give you another really quick example. In the Delphi murders case, one of the girls, I believe Abby, had hair wrapped around her hand. And it turned out to be from the sister of Libby, Kelsey. So Kelsey was a sister. Well, she was wearing a sweatshirt that belonged to Kelsey. Kelsey had her bring one as they were walking the trails because they didn't want the girls, in case they got cold, even though it was seasonably worn in February, still want to bring something just in case, with the wind and things like that. And the way trees shelter brings down the temperature. So, that hair is explained. And how is that hair explained? Well, again, through secondary transfer. And we're talking about a pretty large strand of hair compared to a very tiny fragment found in a knot that, perhaps is just hair that simply couldn't escape from the water, unlike other kind of empty DNA that could have when it's in water, whether it detaches or not, or whatever. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the DNA was destroyed. So that's a lot of the stuff of what you have. But that just shows you, like, context matters.
No doubt. I mean, let's watch the rest of this video. It's interesting.
I mean, they literally asked him like 2 or 3 questions and said, "Good day."
Stidham says he and the West Memphis Three's other attorneys have a theory as to what may have happened.
But we're going to have a smoking gun. We're going to have more than just the DNA. We're going to have corroboration. And there were 2 witnesses that saw Terry Hobbs with the boys that night, yelling at him to go home, which he denies.
Stidham has another theory as to who may have murdered the little boys.
The Hobbs book, by the way, is box full of nightmares from his perspective. I've interviewed Hobbs on my show, so I'll try to re-up that or let people listen to it from him. I mean, he's been put through the ringer on this whole case. By the way, the guys who were found guilty in the second documentary, the second Paradise Lost documentary, fingered Byers, right? And then they switched to Hobbs for the third one. So that should tell you almost everything you need to know. Where they like, I'm 100. I think Baldwin's on there saying like, I'm 100% certain that it's Byers, and then all of a sudden, no, it's Hobbs. Like, it's a joke when you realize so much stuff is like off on this. It's just like, I can't believe anybody thinks it's anybody else other than those 3.
And technically, that happened with Devil's Knot too. The book points to all but John Mark Byers.
That's right.
And then the movie insinuates Terry Hobbs.
You're right. That's a good point. Excellent point.
Were found a stone's throw from a Highway 40 truck stop. DNA belonging to other unknown individuals was found at the crime scene. DNA that can now be tested with new state-of-the-art technology.
If we get enough genetic markers from the new DNA testing, and we can compare it to my suspect, who's a long-haul truck driver.
Stidham says his suspect is currently in prison for other slaying.
This place, for people who don't know, this was referred to as Stonehenge, and this is where they used to hang out and do all kinds of dark stuff, according to the police files.
The FBI says it has a pool of hundreds of suspects, all long-haul truckers, for nearly 1,000 suspected serial killings along America's highways. Stidham didn't divulge his suspect's name. The 2 theories we've mentioned and a myriad others have been offered over the years, but now, finally, we may soon have answers. In April this year, the Arkansas Supreme Court approved new DNA testing in the case, ending a 2-year legal battle fought by Eccles' lawyers to get the green light to retest DNA evidence previously thought to have been lost by the West Memphis Police Department. The DNA will be tested using the MVAC system, an advanced instrument that can actually extract minute particles from inside fabric. Eccles' lawyers will use it to extract DNA from the shoelaces that bound the 3 murdered boys.
They're going to go in there and literally unknot those ligatures where they know that those skin cells are tucked in that fabric, and then they're going to extract them. I think there's no question that we're going to find out who tied those knots.
Benka says results for the new DNA testing will come back early next year. If it can determine who tied the knots, the West Memphis Three may have a chance at the exoneration they have long fought for, and the real killer may soon face justice.
I'm a full-time judge and I can't get involved in the actual defense, but I'll resign my judgeship immediately if we were to get a new trial.
That is Andrew Mobley reporting for us. For more on this,
It's just never going to end, man. I mean, and you talk about re-victimization too. Like the parents just must, like the Moors and all these people who are still around, just must find this just out of their, crazy, just absolutely crazy.
And what I'd like to know, I'd like to know who's paying for this test when it does happen. Is it going to be the state of Arkansas, or is it going to be Damien's representatives? That's what I would like to know, because we don't want another 2011 where we have some DNA results that are cherry picked and they want to reveal what they want to reveal and omit what they want to admit. We don't want that to happen again.
Right. So that's all. My understanding is that these hairs and stuff have never been given to the court. They were just said by the defense, we have this hair. Have you validated that a third party has looked at the supposed hair that fingers Hobbs? Like they just said they have it, but like that doesn't, like I can give you an envelope with a check that says I have a check for $1 million, but until someone sees it, that check, I mean, it could be error. Like, did you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, I don't think a third party's analyzed that error.
Yeah. Again, it's a prove it. It's like, I don't want second or third hand information. I want the facts of it. So, again, and also with this testing, it's a bold claim. I could be wrong, but I don't believe I am. I don't think they're going to find any evidence with the MVAC system. One of the things they say could be a deterrent for DNA testing is if something was in temperature or if it was in water. Well, we have evidence that was submerged in dirty, contaminated water for 17, 18 hours, if not longer. So I want to say it's about 17 or so hours. So it's been in there, and even at that time, it's warm in Arkansas, in West Memphis, Arkansas. So you have that to contend with. Now, some will say, "Are you scared?" No, I'm not scared. But also, what I am fearful of, and I am because they've done this before. Hence the Terry Hobbs, the mtDNA that can't be excluded from Jacoby or Hobbs, is that they'll pull something like that again in court of public opinion. Say they do pull out a DNA sample, which I don't think that they will, but let's say that they do. And so it doesn't really go to anybody. It's unknown. That unknown source could still come from anything and from anyone. The only exception I will make to that is, for example, if Dan Stidham's trucker theory is correct and they're able to identify it to a serial killer trucker who's in jail, then I think I would be stupid not to say, wow, I was completely off. I don't know how this other evidence exists against the West Memphis Three that it seems so clear and concise, yet this is on this. But I would have to call it for what it is, but I don't think that it's going to. But so they'll take an alien or a foreign DNA and they'll try to say that's exoneration. Or maybe a DNA that's an incomplete profile.
Right.
But they'll try to say, but you can't link it. You can't positively say it. So they'll use absence of evidence to try to exonerate Damien, Jason, and Jesse. Though there's other evidence. Again, that's the thing. You're making it a DNA case where it's not a DNA case.
Exactly. You have first person. The Hollingsworth family saw Eccles at the scene of the crime. Muddy. Like, come on. Like, this is like other things. No, that's never been retracted. They're always looking for some kind of way out that doesn't actually address the in-court evidence. It's just always the same. Like that's the whole thing. If you keep analyzing it, it becomes more and more ridiculous. And these guys are in this whole thing. I mean, these are his lawyers. These are paid, like you talk about paid expert, that's basically a paid expert. These are not third-party statements from people. Like if Stidham actually got up and said, I thought Miss Kelly was guilty the whole time. He'd be disbarred. Like, people don't understand that. He still has a obligation to represent his former client.
Well, right. And another very indicative thing of that is
Professional conduct, actually. Yeah.
when your client is saying, I did this, it is in your interest of your client to give him the best deal possible.
Yes.
Not, but him and Crow were saying, oh, but we think we're going to win the appeals. It's like, you don't believe that for 1 minute. Do you believe that? It almost seemed like Dan Stidham wanted to help Damian Eccles out more than he wanted to help his own client out.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you've done so much research, great research. People, check out Burn After Reading. I'll put a link to the YouTube channel. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything I missed, or anything else you want to promote, or your other? I know you did Delphi and West Memphis 3. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, with the Delphi murders case, something I do want to mention with that is that that's another case that you cannot link anything based on DNA. You have to base it on witness statements, which included the killer himself. The killer placed himself at the crime scene when it occurred at those times. He placed himself seeing certain people that other certain people said that they saw a man like him. They couldn't identify them as directly Richard Allen, but a man dressed like Richard Allen. And Richard Allen said that he passed those same people. So those are not coincidences. So that, and also,
sorry to interrupt, but didn't Allen say that on like the very beginning of the investigation? Like, we know the arrest took 5 years, but didn't he say, yeah, okay.
Surprisingly, a day or two after, the picture of the man on the bridge came out. And so what I think was that Richard Allen probably got paranoid, said, they got me somehow on camera. He probably did not know that it was Libby who took which he saw a picture. He didn't know if that was a picture or a video, but he probably had no idea who took it, but saw it was there and wanted to explain himself, because what kind of guy goes and also when he did the interview, he didn't want to do it at his house. He didn't want to do it at the police station. He wanted to do it at a Save-A-Lot. I believe it was a Save-A-Lot grocery store. So he went there. He described himself virtually wearing the same clothes as the man on the bridge, who they call Bridge Guy. Claimed he was there at the exact time. Also explained, the people that he saw going by, and these same witnesses who they said, even again, though you can't point the face as Richard Allen, they claimed dressed as, and the guy on the bridge is the same guy that they saw. Hence, it has to be Richard Allen. And then later, when he was further interviewed, actually at a police station, he added another element. Now, he changed times. Conveniently, he changed times to try to distance himself from the crime. But he claimed that when he was there that day, he was on the first platform, and that he was standing on the platform looking at fish. And one of the witnesses, before the murders occurred, when she was doing her jog, her exercise, saw a man who she described as Bridge Guy, as the guy, as we know, a suspect of murdering Abby and Libby at that time. Richard Allen puts himself on that platform where a witness saw that it was him, and who she said was the same looking guy as the guy who was on the bridge on the picture, which later became like a couple second video, and now it's released. Now it's a 40-second video, and it also shows you how fast he's going on that bridge to get to the girls. So again, that was not a DNA case, but he also gave information that was not known at the time. A man who was coming home from work on a private road had a white van, and he was driving a van. Allen said he was going to do, he was going to assault those girls at a certain point, but then a van was driving, and so he wanted to move them further away. And that private drive is right underneath the bridge, that eventually goes into a house.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's great when there's, things are decided by DNA. That's a good thing. But even when look at the O.J. Simpson case, there's a plethora of DNA. You can argue contamination.
Right. But everything's found at his house. I mean, but so Allen, do you think acted alone, and he's the proper person to be convicted?
There's nothing to me that indicates that someone else was there. Now, there's been some compelling theories. There's been some, like, initially when law enforcement was really looking at Kagan Klein, that was an interesting thing. I thought maybe, okay, Richard Allen was the guy who committed the murders, but maybe somehow it was connected to one of the phishing accounts for Anthony Shots under Kagan Klein. But now I don't believe that anymore. I believe what happened was that I believe Richard Allen wanted to do this for a long time. He probably canvassed at some point for a while to pick who he wanted to pick to do it. It happened to be that day. His wife was working. He was off. He didn't have to work. So you have a perfect opportunity to do it in a certain amount of time. You go and you hang out there. You know, not a lot of people are going to show up. And so you start to pick who's going to be your target. And sadly and unfortunately, not that it should happen to anyone, but it happened to be, two young girls, and they were going in a direction, and he said, I found my target. He had to drink alcohol. Oddly enough, had to drink alcohol to do it. He bought a 6-pack. I think he drank like 2 or 4 of the beers that went out there. And this is like, at noon and stuff like that. Right. So and that's what he claimed. He claimed with his psychiatrist or psychologist that, he was, before he got there, he was, drinking beer to kind of, he didn't say he was even saying he was getting motivated to do it, but he was drinking beer. But most likely he was doing that to kind of dig up the liquid courage, maybe take off the nerves of doing something like this, because your adrenaline's going to be high, right? When you're doing something that's risky.
Super high risk, I would say, to like abducting 2 kids,
And I don't even know if his intent was to murder or if his intent was to, essay. I don't know any platforms that you might be. I don't want to get you demonetized. So I don't want to say the word, but I don't know if that was his original intent or what, because he covered himself up. Did something happen? And then after that van drove by, he panicked, but he also realized he couldn't leave those girls alive. So the attempt was there. The attempt didn't happen. He murdered them. And then, of course, the one similarity is that their clothes was in the water. There was a creek they had to actually go through to get to their side where he committed the crime. And then he undressed some of them, and some of this clothing was in the water. Not all of them, because Abby was dressed in Libby's clothes, which was weird, but it showed that at some point they were all undressed. It was a very weird thing. But I think it was just him. I'm always open to hear evidence that would suggest otherwise. I had
a guy on who thinks that there's another innocent complaint for Allen, that he didn't do it, that it's somebody else, that he was coerced into confessing. So
there's quite a few. Bob Mata is one of them. His dad was the one, I believe that was the lawyer for John Wayne Gacy, I believe. And so he was at the trial the entire time, actually sitting next to Richard Allen's wife, Kathy. So Bob Mata, he sees where the money is, this innocence thing. He gets, there's a lot of people out there that believe in that. There are people that believe in Karen Reed's innocence, which is absurd. And was it Brian Koberger? Is that his name?
Yeah, Brian Koberger. That's the Moscow 4.
Like, it's like, where are you guys coming from? Like, this is really becoming a thing. And it's is this a trolling experiment, or are you just this stupid? Even if you're not fully convinced, you have to look at some of that evidence and go like, man, I don't know. Like, that looks pretty guilty to me. And it's innocence, innocence until proven guilty. And that's true, but we're still curious people. We still hear and we see what we do, and we can change our minds as we go on, as long as we're not hurting anyone. For example, attacking people like John Mark Byers or Terry Hobbs, that, you're doing to them what you're claiming is being done to the West Memphis 3. Like, it's not right. And then there are people that believe that Ron Logan, the guy who owned property where the girls were killed, that she was involved. It's like, to go after him, that's not right. Or these people that they claim were Odinists.
Right.
And they may be Odinists, but they just didn't commit a murder, because the alibis are tight. Like, they couldn't have done it.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It may have been in some kind of network or some weird thing, but that doesn't mean that they were involved. I mean, yeah, that's a crazy case. I mean, do you think the occult aspects of the case are fake, or they're just made up, or what's your view? Like, I mean, with the
Richard Allen case?
Yeah.
It's so funny because, we have the West Memphis 3 case, and we want to scoff at anything occultic related to that. But then with Richard Allen, the innocence movement embraces that.
Oh, interesting.
It's weird. It just shows like it's just how you're influenced. I don't believe that there is an occultic connection. Does that mean something can't come out later that could change my mind? Sure. I just need to see what that is. I looked at the Odinist thing. I looked at it very closely. Everything from pre-trial to the trial itself. Well, the trial, they couldn't even talk about that because they had to show a web of connection, the defense, and they couldn't do it. So, but they had their chance at the pre-hearing, and they failed. Even the experts that they put in there were very general and had no expertise even on Odinism to begin with. They took words out of professors out of context, and so it just completely hurt them. But like I said, yeah, there's nothing there to indicate it. Plus, they really went crazy with the defense that there were prison guards who were Odinists that were making Richard Allen confess.
Yeah, there was huge filings.
And again, all of it was proven to be rubbish. And like I said, the jury saw a lot of Richard Allen, especially in jail too, and they heard his interrogations, they heard his confessions to his. He confessed to his mother. He confessed to his wife. He confessed to the warden. He confessed to other people. He confessed to his psychologist or psychiatrist. I think it's psychiatrist because I think she was able to give him medicine, so that'd make her a psychiatrist. So confessed to him. And I'll say that they were so lucky they put him in that prison versus whatever jail, because I guess they couldn't protect him there. Because he gave to me what I consider to be one of the most outstanding, undisputed confessions of the case that even the police couldn't have known, that even the prisoners couldn't have known, or prison guards couldn't have known, or the warden. And that was that white van. No one knew about that white van and how important that was crossing by until Richard Allen mentioned it. Wow, and that turns out that, there is someone that drives on that private road that owns that van to this day.
Right. Wow.
So,
great to talk with you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, and I'll wrap it up after this.
Okay, sure.
If they didn't have that, taking that to trial, Richard Allen may have been found innocent. That's a possibility because they would have to connect it purely on the timeline after that. And then, of course, the bullet that wasn't shot through.
Right.
Yeah, it was racked and it came out of the case. It came out, and so it was a bullet marking based on that. But it's very angel thin hair, like it's very razor thin, and it's some of the forensics of that can be, I guess, it can be contested. So I don't even know if that would have been enough. So they would have had to decide that purely on the timeline and the witnesses. And the first couple of days of that trial, it did not look good for the prosecution. I thought it looked bad, but later they strengthened things up, and those confessions that saved them, in my opinion.
Wow. Rick, where can people find your stuff, your research, and your work?
They can go on YouTube. You can go to Burn After Reading on YouTube. So put the @Burn After Reading on YouTube, or else it's just going to take you to the movie Burn After Reading, or the Gabby Petito thing where Brian's mother wrote Burn After Reading on a letter that she gave to her son. So again, @Burn After Reading on YouTube, or just put Burn After Reading West Memphis 3. You'll find me that way.
Okay, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And if do you have social media? If anybody wants to follow up with you or ask you any other questions,
on Facebook, if you want to type in Burn After Reading True Crime, I have a private group there. If people would like to join, you're more than welcome. I used to be on X. I'm not anymore. Although I do have what I would call an account where I observe. I don't post. I just observe. I just don't like to be a presence on there because of some of the trolls. It's particularly bad. Plus, I found it to be a harder promotion tool as of late. I don't know if that's due to the changes or what, but
Facebook was always nannying me, like, oh, you can't post this and you can't do this. So that's weird. Like X, I don't know. You got to pick your social media carefully these days. That's for sure. But
that's true. Even The AOL thing is just more for I just post things there if people want to see it.
Right.
More people engage in that I've noticed with X. I don't know if X just blocks something out so that people can't see it, but if they're part of my group, unless they manually take it to where they don't want to see the updates, people will see what I have coming up.
Gotcha. And thanks for listening, everybody. We had about 250 total listeners on X and Rumble and Rockfin. So thanks for joining in and listening. Really appreciate it. If you like the show too, please share it. Please share Rick's stuff too. It really helps. And get the message out, because we're up against a propaganda machine. These guys literally hired a PR agent. And so anything you can do to kind of get the message out or promote Rick's stuff or mine is very helpful and much appreciated. And I really appreciate everybody listening and appreciate Rick and your time and your research. So again, it's Rick Molinax, Burn After Reading. I'll put a link to the YouTube and to his Facebook. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, stay there.